Welcome to another Gamma Partner Artist Feature interview. Today we speak with Ronin. Ronin talks all things creating for yourself, creating authentically, working at Nonnish, where he developed his style, his inspirations and how they started from quite young, and a lot more. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Okay, so very excited to have Ronin, one of our Gamma Partner artists, on with us today. Very enigmatic, mysterious guy. That's a bit of probably a little bit of a synonym there, but he has a very unique style. We're going to dig into it. Glad to have him. Known him for a long time. He's been dropping work with us at Gamma probably back when we were called Stacks NFT with Nonnish, which I'm sure we will touch on. But enough from me. Ronin, introduce yourself. Tell us about, what makes the man, what makes your art, and yeah, go back as far as you like in regards to where you started off creatively, and I guess, how you got to now.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me. So you probably know me as Ronin online, but in real life, my name's Conrad. Please call me that and not Ronin in real life.
Will do.
Well, I guess I do a couple of things. So I'm the co-founder of Nonnish, but I'm also a researcher in Estonia. Basically, I'm interested in the evolution and ecology and distribution of fishes and parasites. And I work with freshwater fish, and it's very exciting. So I work with science kind of during the day, and then in the evening, I kind of dedicate my life to Nonnish. And let me see. I guess that's all there is to say. That's me.
Well, a pleasure to meet you, Conrad. There we go. Is there any overlap in what you do IRL and what inspires you when you're creating? You have a very unique style, which we will look at soon, but where do you think that all started?
I think that's a good question. What overlaps do I see with my research? So I think one common thing with my drawings is that they tend to oftentimes be landscapes. I'm just there's a natural affinity I have for the natural world. Like whenever I'm making a landscape piece of really any kind, I don't even think about what I want to do. I can just kind of like let my mind create some scene, and it's like it's just like brain to paper, no complex thinking. So maybe that's it. Just my natural curiosity for the natural world and wanting to express what I perhaps think is so beautiful in paper in some way, however grim it might be.
Totally. Look, normally we pull the art up a little bit later, but I think we'll be remiss not to pull it up now so we can kind of touch on that. I'm going to pull out what you've created as a partner artist. And it's interesting. You mentioned you live in Estonia, and as we were talking about off air, Tallinn's very famous for its medieval architecture. That's definitely something that goes into the Nonnish project, and you can even see it in these pieces. Just that style, that more old school thing. Is that something that you've enjoyed for a while, or has that come from living there?
Oh my gosh. So I'll answer that with a story. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is, so I have the memory of a goldfish. I don't know how I've made it this far in my academic career. And so the fact that I remember this, I need to emphasize how significant that is. That's what I believe anyway. So when I was young, like 6 or 7 years old, I would look for kind of like treasures or little things at my grandparents' house. They had this, it looked like it was like a castle to me, this kind of Tudor style 3-story building. I mean, just so beautiful, right? And so I would sneak around into the little cupboards and the back rooms that very old and they don't do anything, just have dust, right? Things like that. And I would kind of, get on my tiptoes or crawl down underneath and try to, feel around for something that I could steal, right? Basically some trinket that I could take. And so I guess to just keep it short, I grabbed a hold of, I was on my tiptoes and I grabbed a hold of this small picture frame and I pulled it down. And it was this very old kind of dark wood frame about this big, right? It covered in dust. No idea why it's up there. I've never asked, but I still have it. I went back and took it when I was older. It was this picture, and the reason I'm saying this story is because the artwork was this very simple watercolor piece. It was of a hare, just kind of sitting politely in some soft landscape, and underneath the hare was this artist's signature, and it was like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And so this was a print, a very old print of a famous watercolor piece by basically my favorite artist, Dürer, who's a German master. And I remember when I looked at it, it was like I couldn't stop kind of holding on to this thing, and it was like barely light, like the dark building, so I had a room. And it's like I didn't it's like I didn't have any choice but to kind of be locked in and just kind of look at this thing. It's such a simple little piece, but it totally changed my life. It's like I had no choice but to be inspired by it. So so I was just standing there or kneeling down in this dark closet, staring at this little piece like a frozen statue. And so I would say that what really kind of inspires me, especially with my favorite artist, Dürer, what inspires me, I think, primarily at least in other artists, is mastery of self-expression. I think that's a very, it's corny, I know, but I believe that's true. Like now that I'm kind of like working through it. So I hope that makes sense.
No, it really does. And so you said you were sort of 6 or 7. Were you creative then, or did that start your creative journey?
I was creative then. So when I was actually about that age, I really loved what are they? The Far Side comics with Gary Larson and Calvin and Hobbes, of course. What boy isn't, right? And so I would love to kind of make my own comic strips, clearly derivatives of these kind of comics, more so Calvin and Hobbes. And so my mom, she would just see, I mean, I just had stacks of them, and I would make comics at books, and I would make comics at school instead of being in my books. And we had a group of friends, and we would trade comics that we made. And so my mother, she enrolled. It was only for adults, but she enrolled in this cartoonist's course, and she just asked the professor, could my son take my place? And they were totally cool with it. And so I just kind of got to explore that. And so I got to kind of, play around with that. And so that was at a very young age. And I was constantly supported. And maybe I kind of fell off for a period of time, maybe during university years, but I've discovered it obviously since. And yeah, I'm so glad it's a part of my life.
Totally. And you said you used the phrase mastery of self-expression. Do you find that that's what you're doing when you're creating? I'll pull up your Townsfolk set, which is on stacks. And whilst I'm doing that, yeah, touch on that. Where, like, are you revealing parts of yourself in your art?
Yeah, I think so. Especially when I do things that I'm able to just kind of meditate as I do it. So before I mentioned how when I make a landscape scene, for example, I don't think about what I want to do beforehand. I can just kind of let my hand make the motions, and then I go, oh, I like to, oh, da, 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 da. And in that way, I have like this empty mind. Right? And yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, like you said before, some of it can be quite dark. And as we can see with this set, it's extremely highly detailed, pardon me. How did you start creating using this? Because it's become very iconic of your style. Like when people see this or any of your pieces, they can tell that it was created by you.
So that all goes to PQ. He kind of knew what it needed to more or less look like, and he gave me some simple kind of ideas to go off of, and so it just kind of began like that. But making it in this style, I think that's just a more sort of just kind of a fun condensed version of my larger pieces, I suppose. Um, the backstory behind the character, it's very kind of lighthearted, just kind of this like stupid medieval guy. He doesn't work, he just trips in a forest and has little adventures or what have you. So overall, yes, there is a lot of detail and it has this kind of iconic style. um, but I suppose that the the set was just kind of inspired by what I enjoy drawing the most. These kinds of pen and ink, more kind of complex pieces. I think you can see it in a few of the one of ones there, like Death. That's a really fun one. Yeah. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and if we look at Death, or we look at the one next to him with the, I guess, the blue ink pen for the
Yeah, some
background.
landscape. Yeah.
Yeah, that obviously comes out in it. They must take a while. It's very highly detailed. Has it taken a lot of practice? Has that style and that skill evolved as it's gone on?
Yes, it has. I I suppose what I tried to do in the beginning was to just kind of emulate simple things. I mean, just to get to where I think I am now, and just to kind of be clear on where I think I am now. I think I have my lanes, or a couple of lanes, and I think I'm quite good. But I would never call myself like an expert or master. And maybe I'm being self-effacing. I don't know. I don't think I am. Um, so I would say it maybe took 5 years until I felt comfortable. Yeah, about that time. And I heard this talk from Bill Gates, of all people. And I think he said that no matter how tired he is or how long the day was, when he goes to bed, he always reads from a book. And it can even be one word, one sentence, one chapter, one page. I mean, that's one word more than you would have done otherwise. And that really resonated with me. And in fact, I have books by my bedside because that's something I practice. But I also apply that to drawing. So even if it's just one line, I will always do at least one line per day. I have to. It's a habit. And so when you form those kinds of habits, even if it's just the smallest step, that's more, right? That's progress. It doesn't have to be like this. It can be, like that, right? So that's basically what I would say. It did take time, but I think more than time, what it took was dedication and consistency is what I mean.
Yeah, that consistency in practice is really interesting. So tell me about the pen and ink and the ink on paper, or the pencil on paper style. What attracted you to create like that?
That's another really good question. Maybe I do know, but my first reaction is to honestly say I can't tell you. It's for the same reason that I've got multiple books on maybe Bruegel or Dürer. They were very good at these woodblock prints, and I'm just totally transfixed by it. The way that detail pops out. I think it's of course it's usually black and white or black and brown, and so I think there's something about that kind of minimalism and being able to express in some ways, I think, better than you can in color, these kinds of shapes and curves and turns and um, maybe emotion in some way. Instead of a shade, it's a distinct line, so it tells you. I don't, but I'm just sort of thinking out loud. because again, my first reaction is I can't explain it. It's like, why is my favorite food pizza? Or why is or a better question, because pizza is just the best. Why is royal blue my favorite color? I can't tell you. It just is. So maybe that's a bit disappointing, but
No, I think that that's interesting because it means that it's authentic, and that when you go to create, that's just what comes out. And then, speaking of that, do you create for yourself, or do you draw things that aren't then for ordinals or NFTs? Are you just creating and drawing and doing things physically as well?
no, not most. About half of what I draw or create will typically be for myself. So I really enjoy painting. I've never shared any of my paintings, but I enjoy them. I have a little skull, a ceramic skull, and I painted that all kind of psychedelic. I have a very bright, kind of weird painting style. It's a bit different than how I draw, but I like that. So no, I mean, most of my time, yeah, I mean, it's spent on Nonnish, but that could be any number of things that's occupying my time. Talking about planning things, doing certain things. I mean, art is something that I think everyone should do. I mean, it doesn't. It is therapy. It really is. It doesn't even have to be good. Most of my stuff isn't. Right? I mean, just like for fun, for example, I've just started this. I got this little nice kind of Japanese graph paper book. It's just this kind of nice thing. Um, and I wanted to try to maybe design buildings like skyscrapers because I'm fascinated by skyscrapers. It's just kind of this weird thing. And I am awful at it. I don't I am very glad I'm not an architect because I would be terrible at it. But I still try and I still do it, right?
Interesting. That's an interesting comment, because I'm curious. Well, I assume you know that the art that you've put out, that I've seen at least, that we've shown so far, and we'll pull up some more, is good. You even said before, sort of took you 5 years to become quite adept at it. But then you say that you're not great with skyscrapers. As an artist, how do you know when what you've created is good? How do you know, like, yes, I'm happy with this and I'm actually happy to put it out to the world and perhaps sell it? What does that feel like? Or at least, what is that point in time? Yeah, elaborate more on that point in time when you finish a drawing.
I sometimes I'll think that a drawing is done, but it never is. And even the pieces that I'm most proud of, I guarantee you I can find a little point where there it needed that little extra kind of quarter of a millimeter of ink. And I think that's how it's always going to be. You're never, I'm not ever happy 100%. Um, when do I feel content with it? Like, yeah, this is pretty good. I would say after the main idea that's formed in my head is done, and that could end up being a disappointing piece that I end up kind of hating, and it could end up being something I'm really proud of, and I'd like to share it because I think it conveys something. Um, there's no like set moment at all. It's all just kind of this feeling, because it's all based on this concept that it's just this kind of nebulous, right, thing in your head, these firings of neurons, and you're trying to represent that on paper, right? I mean, so I don't know if there's a set time. I don't think that there is. It's just sort of when you can get that concept that your mind is trying to get out on paper.
And what about the feeling that it's going out to a global audience? What's that like as an artist?
It's humbling. Yeah, I would say that's another, unfortunately, I think maybe simple answer, but I think it's true. especially when people respond positively. That's very humbling. It always feels good, right, to be appreciated. That's normal enough, right? Um,
Ah,
so the feeling is good. Like I did a good job. Like as an artist, I was able to share something with people that they kind of resonated with, to the point where they're like, hey, we should support that. That's really cool. And I think it's cool. And so if you think it's cool, then that's awesome, you know?
definitely. And when you're creating on that note, are you creating for yourself or for others or for both?
It is sometimes both. Yeah, it is sometimes both because you react to it. It's when people give you feedback, you want to get more of that because more dopamine equals more good, right? So what I think is what I think is important is that you can kind of maintain your vision so that you're not straying too far. And I think I do that quite well. There are just things that I don't really want to do, and or sometimes something will be brought up to me, and I'll just be like, yeah, that's not for me. Um, so yeah,
Definitely. And then you mentioned before about, well, your painting, which I would, I would love to see. I'm sure people would love to see. You can share it only when you're comfortable. But you do use, let's, use the expression psychedelic colors in some of what you do. If we have a look at this set, and of course there's a derivative created by Pinky Vision in this set, but if we have a look how you've added color with the Shroom Peddler to some of your characters, and then we can touch on the Greebles as well after this because I'd love to. But if we can obviously see that Pinky Vision derivative. We can talk about what it's like to have someone make a derivative, but talking more about the color choice and where and how you like to add it and where that comes from. Can you comment on that?
yeah. So I know you probably don't believe me, but based on what I'm wearing, but I love color, and I guess I'm really fascinated by it. And I think with my painting, especially, well, and with this, I mean, look, it's all rainbows, right? And these kind of like weird textures that I make with the pen. Um, but with my painting, I mean, it's totally, I mean, all I do, like I have this kind of color theory book, and so I'll kind of consult that and make these kind of little paintings, more or less based on what I'm reading or looking at or finding interesting at the time. And I do like color. I haven't found a very good way um, to necessarily bridge that very well with kind of what I'm more known for, like more, things like that. But I do kind of like to splash it in. Um, so like some pieces, maybe I'll do it in color for a one of one, like that Osmond with the blue land in the background, for
Mm.
example. Um, but yeah, I like working with color, and maybe that's why I paint so much outside of Nonnish, because I love the style and it's my favorite medium overall. But black and white or black and brown, you have to mix things up a little bit.
Totally. And then speaking of color, Pinky Vision's a very colorful artist and he's created a derivative. You can see it second from the left. How does it feel when you know he's a very high quality artist, high caliber artist? How does it feel when such a high caliber artist has created a derivative of your work? What's that sensation like for you?
It makes you feel seen, and it makes you feel appreciated, and it makes you feel connected, right? I think those are just, of course, a tiny number of things that art in general can do. So yeah, I think that about sums it up. I love that, and people will share things in the Discord, or they'll send me a DM sharing something, and it's always very moving. It really is, because again, it's that connection you're making. It's like we kind of are thinking about the same thing in this point in time, at this kind of creative endeavor, and And then it's also just kind of trippy because it's all kind of digital, but it feels so personal. So it's I haven't quite figured that out.
I think that's definitely a unique part of the space, that it is this digital world, so to speak. Like you and I think we've been in contact for 2 years now, and this is the first time I've seen your face. I have to ask, the Greebles, those two guys on the left there. That's got to be fun to create. That's clearly extremely intentional, childlike in a fun way. What's the story there?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I had a brain parasite or some kind of long-lasting COVID symptom. No, I'm just I it just kind of came to me. I was reading this study on psychology where they tried to use facial recognition, and the little creatures that they created to represent people, they called greebles. And I just thought that was so kind of fun. And so then my mind just kind of went ballistic with it. And then we ended up with this set. So it's I think like a lot of things, sometimes with what I'm saying, it's not like a very kind of profound origin. It's like I saw a study and it just kind of like I just did this huge thing.
That's an interesting question on creators sometimes ask me as my job. I obviously work with a lot of artists, and they ask, what should I bring to Bitcoin, or what fits this, what does the audience like? And it's all about creating authentically in the end and finding inspiration from the world around you. So to find it from a study, is that one of the more curious places you've been inspired?
It might be. Yeah. Because the things that inspire me are these just kind of like nebulous or kind of, I don't know, esoteric things, right? It's not so specific like that where it just but I think that maybe just in general, just kind of observing the world and interpreting it the way that I do, um, that might be similar. I don't know.
So speaking of inspiration, I would love to know,
I
let's
don't
pull
know.
them up, where these guys came from. The grafters.
Yeah, that was a really fun set. So I guess kind of the idea behind the grafters that I thought of is, so I love Lord of the Rings, and of course like the orcs and the Uruk-hai, um, goblins, of course. And I was just kind of thinking about maybe zombies one day, as one does. And I thought it might be just kind of fun, like to have a kind of orc or goblin thing that could like graft limbs to itself. To me, that was just like in my like stupid head, I'm like, oh, that's dope. Like, what if it was like goblins, but zombie goblins? And so it, so it just kind of came to me, and I ended up just having a lot of fun with it. I got to kind of bring in again the more typical things that you might expect of me, the more medieval fantasy elements, but in just this kind of random way, like most things, I suppose.
Totally. And you played with color in this set?
Yeah, exactly. I love color. I do. I promise. I should do more of it. I should find a way to maybe one of these days, once I'm happy with something, find a way to get a painting up. That might be fun. I'll have to think of a special event for that.
I think people will want to see this, particularly after watching this chat. And you've done something interesting when it's come to Bitcoin Ordinals. You put this set out, we'll pull it up. It's called The Weight of the Night. And it's pixel art, which is not pen on paper, obviously. Takes a completely different skill set. Where did this come from? And was it hard to learn? Was it hard to get to what I would say is quite a high level of pixels and quality in this set? And then animated as well. You can talk about learning all of this, because it's quite a break from your usual style, or at least technique.
Hmm. Yeah. So PQ and I both are just kind of obsessed with retro era gaming. I think maybe that's something that we just kind of shared in common and maybe brought us together in a way, maybe. And so that's just kind of like what I would play, even when newer things were out. I was always going back to the old Zeldas, like Zelda 1. I mean, that's peak gameplay. And and that's even kind of what I do now. Like if you were to even look at my Steam library, most of the things that I play regularly are these very low poly things. I just think it's so fun. I think being able to represent characters in a reduced way, especially nowadays when it's intentional, I think that's really cool because you have to express an idea rather than this one sort of distinct line. You have to do these staggered pixels, right? Of course, that's what it is. And I just find that minimalism just awesome. And so with my own kind of pixel art journey, really what I was more, well, so I started by just picking it up, and it's really that simple. And that's true for basically everything that I've done. Uh, the, the the time to start was yesterday, as they say. So I picked it up because I have this affinity for it. I have this respect for it. Um, and then I just started practicing, and I was really, really bad for a really long time. But I think I've gotten to a pretty good place now. I kind of have my style, and yeah, it's just like as I said, it's always about just being consistent and practicing. If you want to be better, you have to practice, and you have to be comfortable with sucking for a while.
Is that hard to do? To suck for a
For
while?
me, no, no, not for me. I think one great thing about being in academia is you are basically always being told you're wrong, and you're basically always kind of, you're being grilled. So no, for me, not at all, not at all. It's just what I'm used to. It's that, not thick skin, or maybe it is thick skin. Yeah, it's just that.
And when I look at your pixels, again, unless I've just been conditioned to think this, but I can tell that they're by you. How did you find do you find that your own style goes into everything, or was it intentional with this set?
Well, the truth is that I didn't think much. I I just wanted to try to just sort of show who I was, and that's how it kind of manifested itself. Like if you scroll down a little bit on the left, you can see this landscape scene. Yeah, the Omen. That was basically designed and made in one very long sitting, and it was just this kind of free form idea that was just kind of happening.
And then let's look at this one. It's animated, which again would have taken a different bit of learning. It's very smooth animation, let me say.
Yeah, so
Um,
full disclosure, I have an animator who specializes in pixel art animation. Yeah,
got it.
I'm learning animation now, but no, absolutely, this is his work, or the animation is.
Yeah, fantastic. And tell me about this animator or what they're teaching you, because it's quite a skill. Like particularly this piece, I find it very aesthetic. It's very smooth. It's very flowy. Have you had a practice? How hard is it? What's the process here?
For me, it's really hard.
Mm.
I find it so unintuitive. I really do. I it might be the most annoying thing for me. Yeah, any type of animation, any type of, like even just doing a flip book, those kind of things
Hmm.
where there's the movie, even those, I have no patience for it. I just, it's like I have a meltdown. I can't handle it. So it is definitely way more of a challenge to do it in person, like on your own. And so yeah, that's for me the way to do it. But other people love it, right? It can be this kind of methodical thing, and of course, at the end of the day, you get this beautiful uh, looping image. So pros and cons, I guess.
Interesting. And speaking of methodical, you said a little bit ago about practicing every day. When you start a new piece, do you find that it's methodical, or is every piece different when you create?
It's totally different. Yeah. I mean, some days, I mean, my schedule tends to be kind of erratic. So there will be some days where maybe I'm doing 2 hours of drawing or sketching something or penning in some other thing. And then other days I'll maybe do 15 minutes. It's just totally erratic. I think it averages out well enough over, say, a month, but I have no set schedule and I have no set time. I prefer to work and draw in the evening, but sometimes I'll do it during the day. It's just kind of whenever that kind of spark hits me. It's totally organic at this point anyway. As I said before, I made this into a habit. And so the habit it's just to draw every day. And so it can come at any time, it can at any duration. Um, but before, of course, I would actually schedule it out, but that's not what I do anymore.
And a habit seems very disciplined, or is it a habit because you enjoy it?
It's both. Yeah. I think in general, I think with some things, I'm very disciplined, and this is one thing that I knew. Like as I said, that quote from Steve Jobs really did resonate with me, and it kind of gave me this. I mean, it's like, why do I remember this? What if it gave me this different understanding of how I should try to be disciplined. And it's not that he was like I was some uh, Bill Gates fanboy or anything. It just kind of happened. If it were anyone else, then I would be saying their name. Um, so I would say it's discipline. That's absolutely true. But at the same time, I also love doing it. Like I was doing this for nobody for most of the time I've been doing this. I just have done this because I love to do it. And I just love to create things. Like I'm painting for no one, right? Or if I do, it's as a gift or something like that. So it's a bit of both, and I'm fortunate for that. I think a lot of times when a passion becomes a career, the passion dies out because it becomes a job like anything else. That hasn't happened for me yet. Maybe that's because I suppose spontaneous with it, right? Like sometimes it's okay. It's just a line, right? Like I'm not going to beat myself up over that, right? So I would say absolutely that it's both. You have to have both, I think, for a long career in trying to do this.
Mm. Hmm. And I have to pull this piece up. It's a piece, probably, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to me, one of your most detailed pieces, The Supplicant, that you created for an event that we did actually through Gamma for the artist behind the projects. And you're obviously the artist behind Nonnish. You don't have to tell us specifically about this piece, although you can. But this, like, talk us through the process. Like, this piece looks like it must take you quite a while. Is it? Do you revise and edit and rub out, or does it all kind of happen? What? Can you talk us through the first pencil stroke to the last?
Yeah, I can. So yes, this one did take a long time. This one took, I think, 3 weeks. And I don't remember what Bukowski book it was, but I went through an entire Bukowski audiobook as I was doing it. Just a random fun fact for you. So I think with this piece, there was not much thought. I mean, here's really kind of how it is. Swords are awesome, and I'd like a guy to be kneeling down in prayer or in sort of this sort of supplicant position, praying to some god or gods, maybe for strength or something. And of course, on his shield, the blazon is a lion, and then you have this omen, right? So it's this kind of like scene happening. And then, of course, you have this structure in the background, this hill with this castle and these huge flocks of birds in the distance. And that was, again, as I said with my landscapes before, it really is not so much of this this planned process. Maybe I'll put so I will sometimes pencil in first, just so I can kind of think about something, but not always. And I don't think I did for this one. I think I just kind of started to draw, at least the mountains and things like that. As I've said, landscapes, I don't know why. I could just create something. Maybe it's some artifact of a dream, or maybe I've seen it somewhere. I don't know. But the landscape was more or less just kind of this meditative exercise, and it ended up looking like that. But for the main theme, I thought that a symbol of prayer and strength would be a pretty cool motif.
Has living in Estonia infiltrated it further into your subconscious? Just this style? Or am I pushing a narrative?
No, I don't. I don't think you're pushing a narrative. I think that so the buildings that I'm more or less drawing exist here. They are a 15-minute walk for me. And it absolutely, I mean, I have lived here for almost 3 years now. And even to this day, I'll just sometimes stop and just kind of take in this scene. I mean, it really is breathtaking. I would love for anyone and everyone to visit Estonia at least once. It really is a cool place. And so absolutely. I mean, you're surrounded by it. It's so cool. It's so old. You know, so many people have lived and walked past it. I don't know. It's just kind of a marvel, I suppose.
Where are the physicals for these pieces? Do you have just folders full of artwork?
Well, some of them are just lying around. And then some are in like a book. I really, you know, I don't, I take it seriously. I take it very seriously, but after I've done it, I don't know. Sometimes it's just sort of like, it doesn't really matter now that it exists. I don't know. I think that's somewhat strange, but that's true for me. Like after I've done it, I don't even need someone to see it. I felt the need to make this thing. And so if it ends up over there, whatever, because I did it. That's kind of the point. So it's not always for an audience. So yeah, I mean, I've got books there. I've got some other stuff over there. It's fun. My whole apartment is too messy with my art and my like kind of ravings, I guess.
Do you put your own art up?
No, because as I said before, I always will see something that I would change, and I think that if I were to stop, at least in my own apartment, and just kind of try to appreciate my own piece, I think I would end up getting very annoyed, and I might take it down because I'll just keep seeing things that I would want to change. And then I would forget that I saw them, and then I would remember when I see it again, and that would make me more mad. On and on and on. So no, I don't. I do have a lot of art hanging up, not in here, but all over my apartment I have art, just not my own. No.
Mm-hmm. And when you create, well, apart from pixels, they're created digitally. You create a lot physically, and then it becomes digital. how do you feel about that? When your art is digitized and created as PFP, so you've obviously drawn traits and then they've been put together. Where do you sit on like this is physical, this is digital, this is both, the collectible aspect of it all? How has that evolved for you as you've been involved in the NFT and ordinal space?
Well, I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. It's creative to me, and it's fun, right? When you can create a coherent set, right? Like a well-made set. I think there is actually an artistry to doing that. And I'm sure you can think of some sets that have been made where there are some of these traits and you're kind of, right, I don't know, that doesn't look so good, my man. But I absolutely think that takes a kind of elegance that I can see as an artist, right? And so I can appreciate that. Even if, like, maybe if I don't even like the set, maybe it's not my style, right? I don't think it's cool. But I can still kind of in my head, you get respect because there's this kind of elegance that your set has. So that's one part of it. I also just think that me being able to reach a wider audience because of these, because of things like Gamma existing, right? That's huge. And it's something that I'm able to reach an audience that is very difficult to replicate in the real life, especially if you're not this massive artist doing these huge galleries all over, right? So being able to reach a wider audience, being able to have this extra variable of assembling a set, that's kind of a problem that you have to solve. That's how I view it anyway, and I'm sure many creators would agree. There's just so many reasons why it's fun. I mean, I enjoy doing it. I just make sets. You've never seen them ever, but I just make them for fun. Like I've got digitally drawn sets, some ideas for a physical generative set. It's just fun. It really is. That problem solving element. I think it's great. It makes me think as a creator in a way that I would never otherwise. So I'm a huge fan for in every way.
And hats off to PQ because he's the tech that he and Sam actually both did recently for the Ninja set, but they're very good at helping put all that together. It's probably a good place to wrap up, actually. When you're creating, not for a scene like the Supplicant, but when you're creating, let's just say the townsfolk set, and you know that they're going to go together, analyzing what rules about which ones can work together and which ones can't, that's something you probably never had to tackle up until you got into this space. Has that stimulated you?
Yes, it has. It's another variable, as I've said. So there is this kind of very analytical component to it, where you can't just always be thinking creatively, right? Sometimes you have to solve these sorts of issues. So I would say, yeah, it's absolutely something that I consider. So yeah.
No. Sometimes a short answer is a good answer. Well, thank you so much, Conrad. I was about to call you Ronin, but Conrad, it's been an absolute pleasure. This has been a great deep dive. I think people are going to thoroughly appreciate this listen. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to whatever is coming out next from you, perhaps from Nonnish or as just independently as a Gamer partner artist. And yeah, on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.